Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Wednesday, May 21st, 2025. Today is day 593 since October 7th of 2023. Updates from the Middle East in the last 24 hours. The Israeli army fired warning shots against European diplomats who were visiting the occupied West Bank, including the French and others. This was on Wednesday. It was a delegation of regional European and Western diplomats that were visiting the north of the occupied West Bank. This was near Jenin. This sparked condemnations from the Palestinian Authority and several European capitals. The Israeli Defense Forces said that their troops fired warning shots because the delegation deviated from the approved route. No one was injured in the incident. The diplomats were on an official mission. They had coordinated with the Israeli Defense Forces and Kogat. They were there to observe the humanitarian situation in Jenin when the shots rang out. The delegation included diplomats from China, Japan, Mexico, and several European individuals and countries, including France, Spain, and Italy. An aid worker who did not want to be named on fear of reprisals said that the delegation had about 20 diplomats, that they were briefed on Jenin and in Jenin by the Palestinian Authority. The group of regional European and Western diplomats were standing near the entrance of the Jenin refugee camp when they heard gunshots just before 2 p.m. local time. No one was injured, but there was footage posted on social media that showed the delegation scrambling for cover just inside the eastern entrance to the camp as shots rang out. Prior to this incident, the Europeans were already going to review and I can't imagine that this wouldn't escalate the situation. They were going to review the EU-Israel trade pact because of escalations on the war in Gaza. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I did want to talk about the occupied West Bank just for a second. In the occupied West Bank, I had another update. The Institute of Palestinian Studies posted on social media today asking the question of where is the Palestinian Authority? This is 100 days into Israel's assault on Jenin. The Israeli military has had incursions for weeks on end. 18,000 people from the city of Jenin alone have been displaced. In the surrounding areas, there's been more than 40,000 Palestinians displaced from their homes in the occupied north area of the West Bank. This is scattered. These 18,000 displaced from Jenin have been scattered across 86 locations, and there's no aid plant in sight. So the Institute of Palestinian Studies had an interview with Mohammed Sabah, who asked, where is the Palestinian Authority and where is the urgency for it to protect its people? Now, going back to the EU and its review of Israel's trade pact on the Gaza war escalation, they're reviewing the political and economic agreement between Israel and the European Union because of the catastrophic situation in Gaza. Kaha Kalas said that yesterday, Tuesday. That is the EU's top diplomat. The situation in Gaza is catastrophic. The aid that Israel has allowed in, of course, is welcomed, but it's a drop in the ocean. Aid must flow immediately without obstruction and at a scale because this is what is needed. This is an important European signal that the Israeli government needs to lift the humanitarian blockade. Meanwhile, we will keep working towards a ceasefire for hostages to be released, humanitarian aid to be reach those in need to bring an end to this terrible war. Alice's tone has shifted since last week when she said that such an initiative was unlikely to succeed given the political support inside the EU to apply more pressure, given uneven political support inside the EU to apply more pressure to Israel. So in other words, just in a week, things have escalated in Gaza. The situation's gotten worse. EU diplomats have now been shot at. And so it seems like tides are turning in terms of the EU perhaps being willing to put more pressure on the Israeli government. Also yesterday, Britain halted negotiations on a free trade agreement with Israel. This is significant. The UK yesterday paused their trade negotiations with Israel. They summoned the Israeli ambassador to the UK and imposed new sanctions on West Bank settlers, just as the EU announced that it would review its relationship. So the British Prime Minister Starmer called the humanitarian situation in Gaza intolerable. And this was all amidst the European Commission's vice president, who I was just talking about, Kallas, who described the situation as catastrophic. So there maybe are shifting tides in terms of some of the responses of Europe. Meanwhile, May 12th report by the UN-backed Integrated Food Security Phase Classification said that Gaza is at critical risk of famine. 93% of the population are facing crisis levels of food insecurity. The IPC wrote that the expansion of Israel's military operations, the risk of famine is not just possible, it's increasingly likely. Health authorities in Gaza say that at least 55 people were killed on Tuesday, and over 500 people have been killed in the last 8 days. It's being said that Netanyahu has allowed aid in the last 48 hours, minimal aid into Gaza, to not completely lose U.S. support. Social media channels and others supported a phone call between Abdullah bin Zayed and the Israeli foreign minister, Sahar, in response to the urgent humanitarian food situation for civilians in Gaza. His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan, who's the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, had a phone call with His Excellency Gideon Sa'ar, who's the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Israel. And so that conversation took place and led to an agreement about the humanitarian aid and the UAE, so the United Arab Emirates. So aid will be coming from the UAE that will address some food needs. This will address approximately 15,000 civilians in the initial phase of aid distribution. So that was another response to the aid crisis. The two sides also discussed regional and international efforts to resume the humanitarian truce, although we've been hearing there has not been positive progress in those conversations. Now, all of this sounds good. It sounds good that the Arab states are talking directly to Israel. The foreign minister of Israel is saying we're going to allow some aid in, but this is all talk. On the first day, only 9 trucks were approved in, then 5 were actually allowed in. Now listen to what's happened since then. Listen to the implementation. So it's been reported that in the first days, no aid was distributed in Gaza, despite aid lorries crossing into the territory after 11 weeks of no assistance. No aid. So the UN yesterday said Israel did not allow UN teams access to the supplies. So trucks go in to Gaza and sit inside the Gaza border. Israeli officials said 93 trucks entered Gaza yesterday. This was the first piece of decent news, and it's still a freaking drop in the bucket, okay? And the UN said it confirmed the entry of only a few dozen trucks. So these trucks get there, and then the UN doesn't have access to distribute them. Now, listen to what I heard from a dear, dear friend who sent me a note this morning, and this is what he texted me via WhatsApp. The conditions continue to deteriorate. 1 meal a day of whatever is available, or to buy when cash is available. Do not misunderstand. I have the money in our bank account, but I can't get cash, and it's very hard to buy with wire transfers. Making bread from pasta or lentils, even wood for handmade stoves used inside the home is not available. People break and burn home furniture or plastic. Oof. On the other side, Israel decided to open for humanitarian assistance without really opening. It's just talks without real action. There's no coordination with the UN or the INGOs. The U.S. administration established the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF, to be responsible for this mission. They're ignoring U.S. aid. And BHA, God knows why. I asked hundreds of questions on this. There are no answers. I think the U.S. government only wants to satisfy the fascist government of Israel to destroy U.S. aid so that can easily carry the mission of the delivery of aid to Gaza with the maintenance of U.S. rules and the regulations of compliance. Now, this is from someone who distributes millions of dollars of aid according to all of the regulations of the Israeli and the U.S. government. This person knows humanitarian assistance, and that's what he has to say. He says it's all talk. It's all talk. On the other side, Israel decided to open for humanitarian assistance without really opening. God have mercy. And then a few hours later, there was an alert broadcast that was sent all over media channels. And I got this on my phone and my heart just dropped. And this was from the Israeli authorities. It said a serious warning to all residents in the Gaza Strip located in the northern part of the Strip, specifically in, and then it named dozens of neighborhoods. Gaban, Al-Shema, Fadus, Al-Manshia, Sheikh Zayed, Al-Sultans, Al-Karma. I won't go through them. The Beit Lahia project. I won't go through them all. The Jabalia camp, but you've heard some of these names. And then in bright red, it said this is an advance warning before the attack. The IDF will operate with great force in every area from which rockets are launched. Terrorist organizations, especially Hamas, bear full responsibility for the suffering of the people. For your own safety, evacuate immediately south. And I just want to say, when you kill someone, if you're a military or not, no one makes you kill that person. So Hamas should be adjudicated for the crimes that they committed on October 7th and every crime since. But now the killing of Palestinians in Gaza is on the people who are doing the killing. And friends, we have to say enough. We have to pray for enough and cry out for enough. You should listen, if you have not watched on YouTube, the conversation. It's not really a conversation, but watch the hearing between Marco Rubio and watch it with Senator Van Hollen from Maryland, where Senator Van Hollen says, you know, all of this conversation about the U.S. and ignoring what's happening in Gaza. God bless Senator Van Hollen. God bless the few of our elected officials who are actually saying what's really happening. And so may we be courageous to do so as well. Israeli airstrikes killed at least 55 Palestinians in Gaza yesterday, 15 people since midnight, according to local medics and the territory's Hamas-run civil defense service. The United Arab Emirates announced it agreed with Israel to allow the delivery of UAE aid from the UAE to Gaza. I talked about that already. And today, by evening local time, this report came through. There are now 75 trucks of flour, 5 trucks of sugar, food supplies for the UAE committee, 12 trucks of nutritional supplements inside Rafah. They will enter within hours and head to bakeries. May it be so. And even still, 12 trucks. 12 trucks is nothing. Nothing. This is not enough. Regarding the occupied West Bank, I talked about the Institute of Palestinian Studies in Iran. According to the new intelligence obtained by the U.S., Israel is preparing a possible strike on Iranian nuclear facilities. It's not clear whether there's a final decision on whether or not to attack. God help us if Israel attacks Iran. We really are on the precipice of, as if this is not disaster enough. There's deep disagreement in the U.S. government about the likelihood of whether or not Israel will act. The EU foreign ministers yesterday agreed to lifting remaining sanctions on Syria to help the Syrian people rebuild a new, inclusive, and peaceful Syria. The bloc will maintain weapons-related sanctions based on security grounds, including arms and technology that might be used for internal repression. And the U.S. eased its Syria sanctions after U.S. officials concluded that Syria was in imminent danger of descending back into political collapse and a full-scale civil war of epic proportions. That was the words of Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that yesterday. It's said that part of why the U.S. intervened so that aid would be allowed into Gaza, and part of why the U.S. put pressure on Israel, is because President Trump was moved by the images of Palestinian children suffering. President Trump has been frustrated by Israel's ongoing offensive in Gaza and has instructed his aides to tell Prime Minister Netanyahu to wrap up the conflict. That's according to 2 White House officials. And the Pentagon took possession of a Qatari luxury jet that was sought by President Trump for use as Air Force One. As we've heard, it would take years for this to be brought up to standards for security. and it will cost billions of dollars if it is done so. President Trump praised Qatar for offering the $400 million plane to his administration, but a raft of national security experts have panned the idea, saying it raises significant cost and security concerns. Members of Congress have questioned whether or not the deal is ethical. And not unlike Israel's Iron Dome security system, Trump yesterday announced a $175 billion 3-year plan to build a new Golden Dome missile defense system, which would be capable of intercepting missiles launched from the other side of the world or from space. This is Space Force's Vice Chief of Space Operations has been appointed to lead the project, General Michael Gutling. The first $25 billion tranche of funding for the project would be embedded in Trump's budgetary reconciliation mega bill that's in front of Congress right now. And His Holiness Pope Leo posted on social media today related to Gaza that the situation is increasingly worrying and painful. I renew my heartfelt appeal to allow the entry of dignified humanitarian aid to bring an end to the hostilities, whose heart-rending price is borne by the children, the elderly, and the sick. And we join His Holiness Pope Leo in that plea and in that prayer. May God go before us in the name of Christ. Amen.